The morning fog was so dense it felt like the tanker was cutting through wet cement. Our radar showed nothing unusual, just the same quiet Arctic corridor we'd been pushing through all week. I stood on the bridge with a cup of coffee that had already gone cold, watching the gray curtain outside swallow everything beyond a few yards. Logan, our engineer on watch, leaned over the console. "Visibility's trash again. If this keeps up, we'll be crawling at 5 knots. I nodded, but before I could answer, a sound ripped through the hull, deep, violent, and sharp enough to make the bridge windows shudder. It wasn't the crack of normal shifting ice. It was something heavier, like the seabed itself breaking. "What the hell was that?" Logan whispered. The next seconds felt slow and fast at the same time. The fog thinned just long enough for us to see it. A colossal ice sheet directly ahead of the bow split open as if torn by invisible hands. Massive slabs rolled upward, then crashed into the water with explosions of white spray. And between them, movement, shapes, dozens of them. I stepped forward until my forehead nearly touched the glass. They weren't seals. They weren't drifting debris. They were polar bears. Entire families scattered across the collapsing ice. Some bears were flung into the water as the ice buckled beneath them. Others clawed desperately at new edges, forming and disappearing in seconds. Cubs screamed in high, sharp cries that cut through the wind. "They're falling in," Logan said, voice shaking. The ship lurched again as waves from the collapse slammed into us. A huge bear tried to climb a chunk that instantly rolled, throwing it backward into the freezing surf. Another adult fought its way over a slab that slid toward our hull. Then the first one reached us. A massive male bear, soaked and wild-eyed, slammed its paws against the lower deck rail and dragged itself onto the ship. Before we could react, 2 more followed, scrambling up the metal like it was the only solid ground left in the world. Within a minute, there were 20, then 30, then more. They crowded the mid-deck, slipping, snarling from panic, not aggression. Several collapsed outright, too exhausted to move. Others circled the fallen, as if unsure whether they were alive. I grabbed the internal comm. "All crew stay inside. Seal every exterior door. Do not engage the deck." The bridge filled with voices, confused, scared, demanding explanations we didn't have. No one on board had ever seen anything like this. Bears didn't climb ships. Not like this. Not in numbers like this. Logan stared at the monitors. "Jacob, this wasn't natural ice movement. That collapse looked triggered." Before I could respond, the captain rushed in, still pulling on his jacket. "Report." I pointed at the deck cameras. He froze mid-step when he saw what was happening below. Then the radio console hissed and spat static. The captain tried transmitting. Nothing. He tried another frequency. Nothing. He hit the panel harder than he needed to as frustration rose in his voice. Antennas must have taken a hit from the ice surge. "We've lost all contact." The fog swallowed the world again, leaving us isolated, drifting, and surrounded by more than 100 terrified polar bears seeking refuge on our ship. By midday, the fog had thinned just enough for us to see the scale of what had happened. The entire center of the tanker's deck was covered in white bodies, some standing, some collapsed, others pacing in tight circles like they were still trying to outrun the ice that had swallowed their world. The metal beneath them was slick with melted frost and seawater. Every few minutes, another bear shook violently, either from cold or shock. Nobody on the crew dared step outside. Even from the bridge, we could see fresh wounds on several of the adults, deep scratches along their flanks, torn pads, bruises where they must have slammed into ice during the collapse. Cubs pressed themselves against bigger bears, shivering uncontrollably. Harris paced behind us, rubbing his temples. "We're blocked in. There's no chance we can reach the forward equipment or even inspect the bow." Nolan, one of the deckhands, muttered, "We should try to help them. They're dying out there." "Help them with what?" Another crewman snapped. "You want to walk out there and get torn in half? They're terrified. That's worse than aggression." The arguing began again, quiet at first, then rising with every exchanged word. Half the crew wanted to focus on the ship's safety. The other half couldn't stand watching the animals suffer. I stepped away from the noise and leaned over the engineering console. If the ice collapse hadn't been natural, there had to be something in the data, pressure readings, seismic noise, anything. The tanker's sensors recorded under ice tension and changes in water density around us, and as I scrolled through the logs, One spike nearly made me stop breathing. A pressure surge, massive, abrupt, and centered near the offshore drilling grid. Logan joined me. "What do you see?" "Look at this," I said, pointing at the timestamp. "This spike hit minutes before the ice broke. It's not from drift. It's too sharp." Logan frowned. "That's a breach signal. Something burst under the ice." We exchanged a look we didn't want to acknowledge. If the drilling platform had suffered a gas release or structural collapse, that could easily trigger the kind of destruction we'd witnessed. As if to confirm it, a large piece of twisted metal floated past the tanker a moment later, a chunk of framework coated in ice. Logan cursed under his breath. "That's from the rig. It has to be." Suddenly the room fell silent. Everyone stared through the bridge windows as the wreckage drifted away. This was no random break in the ice. This was a catastrophe. Harris cleared his throat. "Jacob, get me a visual sweep. Anything with heat or flame." I switched the deck scopes to long-range mode. The horizon flickered faintly as the lenses struggled through the haze. At first I saw nothing but gray water and the dying outlines of ice fields. Then, far to the east, a thin, unsteady glow. I leaned closer, adjusting the focus. The glow pulsed again, a weak orange shimmer cutting through the dim. Logan's voice tightened. "Tell me that's not fire." It was. A small, trembling flame above the horizon, barely visible in the evening half-light. The rig was burning. By evening the temperature had dropped again, turning every surface of the tanker into a dull sheet of frost. The little warmth the sun had offered earlier had vanished, and the wind carried a sharpness that felt metallic against the skin. From the bridge we watched the bears shift restlessly, inching closer to the warmer steel sections of the superstructure. They didn't want to come near us, but the heat radiating through the walls drew them in. Within an hour, the entire emergency access route along the port side had disappeared under white fur and trembling bodies. Some bears pressed their heads against the metal just to absorb a bit more warmth. Logan stood beside me, chewing the inside of his cheek. "They're blocking the only safe path to the generator bay." Harris didn't argue. He looked exhausted, hair flattened under his cap. "We're running on reduced output already. If we can't stabilize the generator soon, we won't have enough thrust to stay out of the debris field." I checked the engine readings again. Power demand was higher than it should have been, probably from the heating system struggling to keep the interior from freezing. Outside temperatures were dropping faster than expected, far faster than normal. "Jacob, Logan, gear up and take the service corridor," Harris ordered. "Don't go onto the open deck. If the bears push inward, retreat immediately." We grabbed insulated suits and clipped safety lines to the hooks along the inner wall. The technical corridor ran beneath the outer walkway, sealed from the deck but thin-walled enough that we could hear the scraping of claws overhead as the bears shifted positions. The metal vibrated with every heavy step. We moved slowly, our breath echoing in the narrow space. The air smelled like cold oil and ozone. Condensation clung to the pipes, freezing into long, thin spears. Logan tapped the pressure gauge on the wall. Output's fluctuating. Something's straining the system. We reached the first inspection hatch and peered through the small reinforced window at the middeck. 3 adult bears lay almost motionless near the rail, sides rising and falling unevenly. Another stumbled as it tried to stand, its legs shaking violently. "They're exhausted," Logan whispered. "If they start collapsing near the vents, we won't be able to reach the intake at all." I didn't answer. My stomach twisted at the sight. The animals weren't aggressive, but weakness made them unpredictable. One wrong movement from the ship, one sudden noise, and panic could ripple through the whole mass. We continued deeper into the corridor as the tanker groaned and tilted slightly. The drift had increased. We were being pushed east, straight toward the floating wreckage we'd seen earlier. Logan cursed under his breath. "If we get stuck in that debris, it'll tear open half our hull." We finally reached the generator bay. The hum was louder than usual, not a good sign. Logan opened the access panel, and his face tightened the moment warm air rushed out. "That's not maintenance heat," he muttered. "That's overburn." He traced the lines with his gloved fingers, then stopped abruptly at the second fuel pump. The metal casing had begun to discolor, darkening at the center. "Jacob, this pump's running hot. Too hot. If it keeps climbing." He didn't finish. He didn't have to. A fuel pump overheating in sub-zero conditions meant only one thing. We were inches away from a fire hazard on a ship surrounded by terrified polar bears and drifting toward wreckage, and we were the only ones close enough to stop it. By the time dawn pushed a pale glow through the bridge windows, the temperature had fallen even lower. Frost crawled over the glass from the outside, and the metal groaned as the ship shifted in the current. Nobody slept. Every few hours we checked the deck cameras, hoping the bears were still holding on. The first sign that something had changed was a faint crackle on the radio. Soft, inconsistent, almost imaginary. Harris lunged for the control panel as all of us froze in place. North Pearl, do you copy? Repeat. North Pearl, respond. For a moment, none of us breathed. Then Harris pressed transmit. This is North Pearl. Signal weak, but readable. Static surged, then cleared just enough to form words. This is Coast Guard Sector 4. We lost your tracker in the collapse area. Status report. Harris kept it simple. We're intact, but we have a massive wildlife situation on deck. Over 100 polar bears. Many injured. A long pause followed. When the officer spoke again, the tone was different, stricter, heavier. We have new information on the incident. The drilling platform experienced a subsurface gas breach. Pressure ruptured the ice shelf and triggered a domino collapse across several miles. Wildlife in the area was displaced. Displaced was the calm way of saying thrown into chaos. Logan muttered under his breath. That explains the spike. I felt something sink in my chest. I had defended this route when others raised concerns. Said the projections on ice stability were solid. Now that confidence felt like guilt. The officer continued. Assistance is en route, but conditions prevent close approach. You are to maintain distance from the debris field and do not physically intervene with the animals. Understood? Harris's jaw clenched. Understood. A second voice cut in, corporate liaison, patched through from the mainland. North Pearl, this is fleet operations. You are ordered to avoid direct contact with the wildlife. Liability is high. Remain secured until further instructions. Logan scoffed. So we just watched them die? No one answered. I turned back to the monitors. The bears looked worse in daylight. 3 cubs were barely moving now, pressed against the ribs of larger adults. Their breaths came shallow. One lifted its head weakly, then let it fall back onto the metal deck. Harris rubbed his face. We can't break protocol. But my eyes stayed on the smallest cub. Its sides heaved irregularly, each breath slower than the last. Hours crawled by. The glow on the horizon, the remnants of the burning rig, faded into gray. The deck frost thickened again. Several adult bears shifted unsteadily, their limbs stiff from cold. Then the smallest cub tried to stand. It managed half a step, then another. Its legs buckled. It slipped forward, rolled sideways, and hit the deck hard. The crew gasped as one. On the monitor, the cub lay motionless for a heartbeat. Then a swell lifted the ship, and its limp body slid toward the open maintenance ramp we'd forgotten to retract during the emergency. Harris swore loudly. Get that ramp shut. But it was too late. The cub's body drifted another few inches, edging closer to the dark drop beneath the railing. Jacob, Logan both turned to me at once, because we all knew exactly what was about to happen. The moment the cub slipped toward the open ramp, instinct overrode protocol so completely that the world narrowed into a single, urgent point. I didn't think. I just ran. Harris was still shouting after us, ordering us to stay inside, warning us about Coast Guard instructions and corporate liability, but his voice barely reached me through the pounding in my ears. Logan was already pulling open the emergency cabinet, grabbing the thick coil of safety line, the folded rescue net, and a thermal wrap we rarely used. We sprinted together down the inner corridor, boots hammering against the metal flooring as the ship groaned around us. Another roll of the hull shook the passageway, sending dust from overhead ducts drifting through the air. When we reached the maintenance access, the ramp controls were vibrating under the strain of the wind. On the screen showing the deck camera, the cub's limp body slid another few inches. Frost clung to its fur like powdered glass. Its small paws twitched once, then went still. The adult bears closest to it stirred restlessly, lifting their heads with soft, fearful grunts. But they were too weak and too far to intervene. Many had barely survived the night. Some still trembled uncontrollably from cold. Logan thrust the net into my hands and planted his heels against the bulkhead. We'll anchor here. You take the line, I'll hold you steady. Don't lean too far. I clipped my harness into the wall bracket and lowered myself toward the narrow service window positioned a few feet above the ramp. It was never meant for this. It existed for clearing blockages and passing tools, not for hauling animals out of danger, but it was our only shot. Through the opening, the air smelled like brine and cold iron. "Hold me," I told Logan, bracing myself. He gripped my belt with both hands, locking his arms as another blast of Arctic wind ripped through the gap. The cold hit so suddenly it felt like glass scraping across my cheeks. My fingers stiffened the moment I extended the net outward. The cub slid again as a swell struck the hull, drifting directly into the widening drop beneath the ramp. For one terrifying second, I thought we were too late. Then its body shifted just enough for the mesh to catch. "I've got it," Logan barked, voice cracking. We pulled together, muscles screaming as the net's edge caught on the frozen metal lip. My glove slipped twice. Logan shifted his stance, grunting from the effort, and threw his entire weight backward to keep me from falling through the frame. "Move, pull," he shouted. We heaved one last time, and the cub lifted clear of the ramp, tumbling into the maintenance bay and landing with a soft thud. It wasn't moving much, but its chest rose in small, uneven breaths. I dropped to my knees beside it, fumbling with the thermal fabric. The moment I wrapped it around the tiny body, I felt how shockingly cold it was. Its fur was soaked, its skin like ice under my fingers. Harris's voice erupted through the intercom above us. "Coast Guard is on standby. They're requesting constant updates." I pressed the button. 1 cub secured. 2 more still critical. Copy. Wildlife barge en route. ETA 40 minutes. 40 minutes felt like an eternity. While Logan rushed back to stabilize the overheating pump, the rest of the crew scrambled to gather carriers, restraints, heating packs, and whatever else the biologists might need when they arrived. We checked ventilation paths, secured loose equipment, and moved anything that could block the wildlife team's access. The bears on the deck shifted occasionally, but exhaustion kept them from panicking at the noise. Outside, the sky darkened into a muted steel blue, the kind that meant another temperature drop was coming. Frost spread along the deck rails, creeping toward the cluster of bears like a slow, pale tide. When the wildlife barge finally appeared on the horizon, a reinforced craft built for icefield rescues, its orange stripes glowing faintly in the dim light, I felt something in my chest unclench. The Coast Guard escort stayed behind it, keeping its distance but guiding the approach. 2 biologists boarded using the lee side ladder, shoulders hunched against the cold, faces hardened with focus. They carried insulated crates, sedatives, portable scanners, and enough blankets to wrap a small herd. Their movements were quick but quiet. They checked each cub, then the adults, murmuring updates into their radios. Some bears resisted weakly, more out of confusion than fear. Others barely reacted, eyes dull with exhaustion. With calm, practiced gestures, the biologists guided the stronger animals toward the extended transfer ramp. One by one, the bears left the deck. The sound of their claws against the metal ramp echoed through the hull, soft, slow, weary. The final adult remained longer than the others, an old male with a fading scar down his flank. He stood at the edge of the deck for a long moment, staring toward the silent horizon where the rig's flames had once glowed. Only when one of the biologists approached him with gentle patience did he turn and lumbered down the ramp. When the bears were gone, the deck looked impossibly empty. The silence felt heavier than any storm. A week later, after we'd left the ice fields far behind and the sea had returned to its calm, indifferent rhythm, a message arrived on the ship's terminal. Harris printed it and handed it to me without a word. All 3 rescued cubs survived, stabilized, reintroduced to firm ice near the northern ridge. Adults dispersed safely. Another line followed. Personnel on site confirmed that intervention by crew prevented further loss. Logan leaned against the rail beside me. "Told you the sea wasn't done with us." I looked out the porthole at the endless stretch of water, smooth, quiet, and brutally honest. Sometimes the ocean isn't the threat, I thought. Sometimes it just shows us who we are, and waits to see whether we rise to the moment or drift away. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss new stories. And now just click the playlist or the next video on your screen.